If you have been in any shop, you're used to common wood glue, like this Type Bond 2 wood glue that I have here. This is one of my favorite glues out there, very good glue, easy to work with. However, there is another adhesive that you need to know about that is even more versatile than this and is a must for any person's shop. And that's what this video is about. It's about that adhesive. And that adhesive that I talked about was a two-part epoxy adhesive like this from System 3 Epoxies. They were kind enough to donate this material for this video, but I am not sponsored by them or anything. I have just used it in the past, and they were kind enough to supply me some. It's a very good epoxy, and it's best to buy it in the two-part system. You see it at the hardware stores in tubes, little squeeze tubes, but the thing about that squeeze tube is you lose some of the versatility that you will get in a bigger two-part kit like this one. Now with epoxy, you have two parts. You have a resin and you have a hardener. And the hardener comes in different speeds. From System 3, it's 3 different speeds. So there's one that's fast, there's one that's a medium setup, and then there's one that's a slower setup. You kind of choose those by the time that you want it to set up, and also you can choose it by the temperature of your surroundings. So you want a faster setup if you're in a colder surrounding. So what you do normally with these two-part adhesives is you mix them in a 1-to-1 ratio or 1-to-2 ratio. With the System 3, it is a 2-to-1 ratio. It's 2 parts of the resin to 1 part of the hardener. The mixing is very easy. You just take normal mixing cups. I usually use like drinking cups. System 3 provided some cups for me, but they're just drinking cups. That's all they are. You can use plastic or you can use paper. And you need something to stir it with, like these little stir sticks here, tongue depressors or what have you, little sticks. And what you do is you'll either have graduations on the cup or you can mark approximate graduations on like a drinking cup if you're using a drinking cup. But on here it's already marked out. So you just kind of make a mark that would be 2 parts and then a mark that would be the extra 1 part. So you kind of have to judge the volume of it a little bit. You can be off a little bit. It's not a precise measurement. You just want an approximate 2-to-1. The alternate to that is you can weigh it out. And I'm sure System 3 provides, or any of the epoxy providers out there, provide the weight ratios, and you can weigh it out that way. If you really want to be precise, weight is the way to go. So you take your cup, and I'm just going to mix a small amount for my demonstrations. So on here, there's a 2, and then there's a 3 ounces. So I'm going to pour 2 ounces of the resin and then fill it up to the 1/3, which would be 1 more ounce of the hardener, and then mix it together. So I'm going to take the resin, and I'll pour it up to the 2 mark. Okay, put the cap on it. The problem with the resin epoxy, one of the issues with it is it's kind of hard to clean up. I believe mineral spirits cleans it up, or probably acetone. One of those will clean it up. You just have to be careful. A lot of times you may want to wear rubber gloves, because once it gets on you, it's kind of hard to wash off, and it's probably not the best to get on your skin. So now I'll take the hardener, which I'm using a medium hardener, which is probably about a 2-hour cure time or so. And then I'll fill it up to the 3-ounce mark. That means I'm pouring 1 ounce of the hardener in. All right. That's to the 3-ounce. So I just poured in 1 ounce of the hardener. So now all you have to do is mix it. On some of the systems that I've bought in the past, I've bought, I think they're gallon and half-gallon versions, a little bit bigger than this kit. And the thing about that is you can buy gallon pump, volumetric pump dispensers for those gallon jugs. You may be able to do it for this. So that way all you have to do is go up, and I'll put a link in the description for those pump dispensers for the gallon and half-gallon jugs. They don't work on this size. But then all you do is 1 squirt, like 2 squirts for the resin and then 1 squirt for the hardener, and you don't even have to measure it out then. So if you get those, it's excellent. It makes it a lot faster. So you just take it, your stir stick, and you just need to stir it. Be real cautious not to stir air into it. It'll be real easy to just, kind of whip it up and stir some air in it. You want very little air in it. So just give it a slow stir for probably a minute or so to get it pretty thoroughly mixed. Scrape the sides. I always scrape the sides a little bit because you'll get some resin that doesn't mix and it won't set up. If it doesn't get mixed with the hardener, it won't set up. So you just mix it together like this. Scrape the sides a little bit. Now once you mix it together, it starts to set up. But this is 2-hour setup, so I have a working time that's real good. It's a long working time. I think there's a faster time of a few minutes, and like the stuff in the store is like 5-minute epoxy, and that's pretty fast. You have to work pretty fast, but I like the medium hardness or the medium cure time. That gives me time to do what I need to do, clamping and setup time. So once you get all that mixed up, I got still a little air in it, you can pull it under a vacuum chamber, and that'll de-air it or degas it. But for general woodworking, you don't need to worry about that. Another thing with epoxy is if you mix up a whole batch, like you're going to do some different kinds of work with it, this stuff heats up when it cures. And I've had it enough in there heat up where it started melting the cup. And you don't want that, because once it melts the cup, it runs all over the place. Hopefully it sets up by then. But it will get hot as it cures. You'll feel it. That's a chemical reaction to the glue. So we mix it up. Now, the first thing that you can do with this adhesive is just use it right out of the bottles. And if you use it right out of the bottles, it's kind of like the consistency of honey. As you can see, it kind of runs off the end of the stick. That's good if for some uses. And that's the first use I'm going to do right now, is just using it in place of a woodworking glue. Now you would want to use it in place of a woodworking glue if you're gluing up a project that is going to be outside in the weather. This is excellent outside in the weather. They build wooden boats out of this stuff. So it is virtually impervious to weather. So you would want to use this if you were building something, you know, maybe even like Adirondack chairs, glue up for the chairs like that, doors, glue up for the doors. I could have used it for the doors to my shop instead of the Gorilla Glue, the polyurethane glue. It doesn't foam, so it would have been probably a less messy choice, and it would be a far superior adhesive than the polyurethane glue that I used. However, polyurethane glue is good. So for the first demonstration is just a regular glue up. And I'm just taking two pieces of wood that have a clean edge. And so all you do, I'm just going to use the tongue dispenser, is just slather it on like you would wood glue. You want just a nice coat. You don't want too much on because it'll squeeze out. Now you gotta be kind of a little bit more careful with this stuff because it's harder to clean up. Wood glue, you can use water to clean up, but with epoxy, it's a little harder cleanup. So you'd want to use this when you're gluing together boards that you're going to sand afterwards or plane down afterwards, or you want to make sure that you mask it off. You can mask off the joint if you want to do it that way. So then all you do is put it together, and I'm going to put it on this piece of paper. Now at the end, I'll give you a little trick, and it involves what I just did, but you'll have to wait until the end. So I'm just going to put a clamp on it. Just to clamp it together. And that's your first use of it, just out of the bottle. Now, what makes this adhesive really versatile is you can also use it. And what I like to do, I'll use this. I need to prop up my clamp a little bit. Okay. Now, what I like to use it for, and you can't do this with wood glue, I like to use it as a finish. Now, if you brush this stuff on, unthinned, just mixed, it's almost like a thick varnish. And what's great about that is you can paint it on surfaces that you want to finish on, and that surface is darn near waterproof. I have built steam boxes out of utilitarian plywood, just cheap utility plywood, and I've brushed it with a coat of epoxy, and they were steam boxes, so they were completely wet, and they would gather water at the bottom, but it never damaged the plywood. So this is an excellent waterproofer. So that's my next use for it, is as a waterproofer. So you just, like I'm going to put it on this piece here, you just brush it on. Just brush it on like a thick, actually it's the same consistency as the marine grade varnish I use for my doors. So just brush it on. And you can probably, I've only used it 1 or 2 coats, and I didn't really sand or in between them, but you could probably finish this just like varnish. It'll be a gloss finish, but it will give you an excellent finish. I'm sure there's some other places out there that'll, like boat building places, that'll tell you how to do this better. Like I said, I've only used it as utility. Okay, just brush it on. Now once it cures, you could probably sand it and then apply a finish coat to it. And that's probably all the coats you would ever need for it. And you'll have a perfectly waterproof finish. Now, if you want a surface finish with some extra protection, and they do this a lot with boat building, like cedar canoes and stuff like that. They'll build the canoe out of cedar and then they'll cover it with a fiberglass cloth. Just like what we did with the finish part, but we're going to embed the cloth in to give a very strong surface protectant. Strong enough for rocks, definitely sand and all that kind of stuff. So all you need to do is get some fiberglass cloth and you just wet the surface like we did for the finish. You want it pretty thick. You don't want to brush it out too much. Almost kind of dab it on, I guess. Because you want to thoroughly wet the fiberglass cloth. So just brush it on nice and thick. Not too thick. I mean, you don't want it running all over the place. But you definitely want to thoroughly wet that area. Kind of brush it out just a bit. Then you can take, I don't know, place it there. You can take your fiberglass cloth, place it onto the finish. You know, have some little strings. Place it onto the finish and then kind of dab it and start wetting it from the top side. And you want to kind of do it slowly because you don't want to get too much air into it. You don't want to trap air. So you just kind of want to soak it in. And it'll also kind of want to move on you. So you kind of got to brush it this way and that. You just want to thoroughly wet that area. And as you wet it, that fiberglass cloth will slowly get transparent. It won't totally go away, like totally transparent. I think you have too much air trapped in it to really be transparent. But you'll start to see the wood grain show through. It'll be kind of a little bit matte finished. But once this is cured, and then kind of brush, before it's cured, brush it out just a little bit so that you get all the drips and stuff out. And then any kind of stray fiberglass hairs. And this, once it's cured, will be a very strong surface finish. Like I said, this is what they do for canoes, cedar canoes. Okay, there's a little hair. We'll get that out or to the side. And that is the third thing you can do with cedar, or not with cedar, with epoxy, is embed fiberglass onto the surface to give a very strong finish. Now, the good thing about this resin, and it's what I told you about from looking at epoxy at the store in the tubes, the epoxy that's at the store in the tubes generally has a thickener. And so the good thing about having a kit is you can add your own silica thickener to it. Now, this will thicken it up. It won't give you much added strength like a fiberglass. It'll thicken it up for you. So all you need to do is just take some. It's real light, fluffy texture. Kind of break it up. It's kind of lumpy from the shipping. And just spoon some in. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some of this out. I'm going to pour some of this out because I've got another use for this epoxy resin. So I want to half it up. Okay. And I'll set aside half for the next use. Okay. So you just put the silica thickener and just spoon it in. And you'll want to just put in, enough to just thicken it up. And you want it to the thickness that you want to use it at. Sometimes you want it a little thicker. Sometimes you want it a little thinner. But see, it's already thickening up. The thickened epoxy is great for when you have two pieces of wood or metal or what have you that don't quite fit together, very good, to where you need some gap filling in the adhesive. So that's why you would want to add the silica filler. Like these two pieces of wood, they don't, they're about halfway planed. The rest of the surface is kind of rough. So we need an adhesive that fills that gap, and that's what the silica is great for. So you just take the epoxy thickened up and you just spread it on the wood. Still a little lumpy, but that's okay. See how it's a lot thicker and it's not running. Now, if it's a little thin and you don't want to add much more thickener to it, you can always let the epoxy set up just a little bit, because it doesn't instantly set up, it slowly sets up. So over time it just gets thicker and thicker. Like this stuff almost seems like it's starting to thicken up. So then you can put the two surfaces together and that epoxy will fill in that gap for you. Okay. And probably don't even need to clamp that together. Now the great thing about epoxy is it's not just for wood, it's for many different materials. We already saw it with fiberglass. Now we can use it to glue metal pieces onto wood or metal to metal. Sometimes plastic. It just depends. I have actually used it on an HDPE, high density polyethylene plastic, and it did pretty good. You want to degrease the plastic or the metal that you're gluing, but it's really good for gluing. It's really good for gluing metal to wood and other kinds of materials to wood. Even glass you could probably glue things to. So I would use the silica filled one with the metal. So I would just put it on like this. Nice, decently thick coat. And then you can take whatever metal part you have and just set it down in it. Kind of squish it down just a bit. And of course you can be as clean as you want to be. This is just a demonstration. But you can kind of let it squeeze out, and that'll give you a little bit of a fillet, and it'll be just that much stronger. So if you want to like glue magnets to a cabinet to where, you know, some sort of magnetic catch, you can do that, where you can't necessarily put a screw through it, like, you know, drilling a hole through them. Some of the rare earth magnets will shatter them, so you can do it this way. Now we'll take the other half that I set aside, the resin, and there's another additive you can use with it, and this is wood flour. And wood flour will give you more of a putty type texture, like a wood putty. It won't be clear like the silica filler is real clear. So you'd want to use this for, you would want to use this for painted finishes. They use it in boat building for building up fillets. But I would, you know, for woodworking, I'd probably use it for, you know, filling for painted finishes, or a filler that you want more of a wood look to, so you can add the wood flour to it. And I'll just add the wood flour to the second pot of resin that I have. And you just add it in just like the silica filler. Probably, there we go. So when you mix this up, mix it real good, and you will get kind of like a Bondo kind of filler. It's kind of thickening up. Got a nice wood tone to it instead of clear. With this, I would use it almost like a putty consistency. Now, the more you add, the less of a strength it'll have, because you're not really adding strength to it. You're just adding filler, basically. And I have a sample here with a hole in it, sample piece of wood. So if you have a project and you want to fill in a portion of it and you're painting it, or, you know, even staining it or whatever, this may be a good alternative for you, is to use this, especially if it's outside. Like I said, epoxy is superb in the weather. It's what you want to use. I mean, they use this on boats. And kind of scrape it off a little high. There, that's good. And that's epoxy with wood filler. So I've got all of my samples here. They're curing, and I'm going to let them cure overnight, and we're going to look at them in the morning. It's a medium cure or a medium hardener that I'm using, so it's about a 2-hour cure time. However, I just like to let it sit overnight. That way I'm not pushing the joint or anything like that, and I'm not, you know, going to break something because it's not fully cured. I just let it sit, let it fully cure, and we'll look at them in the morning. So here we are the next day, and all of the epoxy is cured and is set up and is ready to look at, and we'll look at each one of these samples. The first sample was the clean, tight wood joint with the unthickened epoxy. And I went ahead and sanded the joint so you can see the glue line. Now on the back side, you can see where the epoxy squeezed out because it's real runny when it's unthickened. But it didn't stick to the parchment. I had it laying on the parchment like that. So nothing sticks to parchment. So it's a really good thing. I have the old brush that I was using yesterday on it, and it just comes right off. Nothing sticks to it. And then the next sample is the unthickened epoxy just brushed on like a varnish. And you can see that the surface kind of has some nibs on it, like a first coat of varnish would. So you'd want to lightly sand those off. and then put on a second coat of epoxy if you wanted a little bit better finish. For a utilitarian finish, this is fine. It'll give you a very waterproof finish. But that's epoxy used as a surface coat, unthickened. The next one is the unthickened epoxy resin over a fiberglass cloth. And you can see the fiberglass cloth hopefully showing through there. And same thing, if you want a better finish, just kind of lightly sand it. Don't sand through the cloth. And then apply a second coat and you'll get a little bit better finish than that. But that's first finish. And it's a tough finish. It would withstand a lot of abuse, you know, rocks and all sorts of stuff. So the epoxy, this is epoxy resin over fiberglass cloth. The next sample was the Silica thickened epoxy, and I went ahead and sanded the joint. Now it kind of, I sanded the joint to show you how big the gap would be as compared to a tight gap. So that's almost an 1/8 inch gap that is filling. So it kind of settled into the gap a little bit. So I didn't totally fill it because it slumped down. You could probably add more silica to that glue, the epoxy, and it wouldn't slump as much, but it slumped. So you could add a second coat if you needed to fill it and then sand it again. But that shows you how, and then on the end there, it's kind of a wedge-shaped gap. Pretty good sized gap, but epoxy is good for void filling. So this is a pretty strong joint. It'd be much stronger than wood glue trying to fill that kind of a gap. Then the next sample was metal glued to wood, and you could clean that up a little bit if you wanted to, you know, by being a little bit more careful, but just for a sample, it was kind of messy. But anyway, it glues metal to wood really good, and then that extra fillet around will give you a little bit extra strength, and then of course the middle will it'll give you a mechanical strength to it instead of a bonding strength. But that's metal bonded to wood with the silica thickened epoxy. And then the last sample is the epoxy thickened up with wood flour, which makes it kind of a Bondo. In fact, it really is very, very close to a Bondo consistency. And I went ahead and sanded off sanded it smooth to the surface, and it sands real good. Sands about like epoxy, sands about like Bondo does. But you would want this kind of a fill if it's out in the weather, because it won't crack out like if you were to use wood putty, water-based wood putty. The weather would end up cracking out. And this doesn't, because it's got an epoxy bond to it. And we also use this in my past experiences furniture making for filling portions of wood that we were afraid that would crack out on a piece of furniture. So if we had to shoot a nail, often we would fill it with an epoxy filler, Bondo, or a wood filler, but you could use this just as easy. So that's epoxy with wood flour, makes kind of a putty.
In this video, I've gone over just a few uses for epoxy for your shop. There are many more out there. If you have one and want to share it with everybody, please feel free to drop it in the comments below. I'd also like to thank System 3 for donating the product. I have links for everything down below in the description. And if you like this video, please like or subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.